Hey there, folks, it's Dan here. You're gonna notice that my audio quality is bad in the beginning of the episode and changes partway through the episode. That's on me. Don't worry about your headphone audio quality or something weird going on with your podcatcher. I started recording with the wrong input and I didn't feel like re-recording any of it. So we are just gonna leave it be. So sorry for that. We'll get it fixed next week. Thank you so much. Love you. Enjoy the episode. Hello, and welcome to the College of Creation. My name is Dan.
And my name is Michael.
And we are Dungeons & Dragons DMs who love to homebrew items, spells, creatures, and features for D&D. It's a great time. This is a show where we challenge ourselves and each other to make new homebrew every single week based on community prompts. We got a big old table of things that we roll on, and every single week we make something. It could be a subclass, could be an item, could be a spell, could be a monster, could be something entirely different.
Could be anything.
It could and has been some like combination of all of them.
Correct.
It's the whims of our wonderful community here at the College of Creation. And we're so happy to have you here. Michael, how has your week been?
My week has been strange. This was one of those weeks where I wasn't super inspired right off the bat, but I wasn't really lagging behind at the end of my week. It was sort of in the middle somewhere. I had a bunch of ideas right away.
Yeah.
I sifted through them relatively quickly and found the thing that I wanted to do, and it took an average amount of time to do it. I wasn't finishing it up today, but I didn't get a jump on it. Just in the middle, a solid 50%.
Yeah. I think a part of probably why, because I feel the same way, probably part of the reason for that, though, is that we've talked about it before, that like subclasses are the thing we sort of engage the most regularly and intensely with.
Yeah.
And so I think both of us are just in that space of like, when you give us a subclass concept, we're going to find the idea and then we're just going to be able to like ride that idea and make it work.
Yeah.
Because once you give me that, I can let those wheels turn really easily. It's sometimes more challenging. I think, for like the druid spells, it was so challenging for me to have to come up with not just one sort of core concept, but 9 different ideas that I had to
that was tough.
Figure out the mechanics of,
That week was difficult, but also really fun because I don't normally make spells. And so I think this week, this is the first subclass we've made after a long stretch of weeks making different things, and it just felt like okay, I can relax. I can relax here.
Felt a little bit like coming home, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. I'm comfortable here.
This is a comfortable space for both of us.
I know what I'm doing here. I did have a little bit of difficulty with the capstone. I'm not 100% sold on the thing that I made, but I think it is within the theme of the subclass. So I'm not mad about it. I think that it will be better when we get around to updating these.
To remind our listeners, the thing that we rolled to make this week was a lightning and thunder focused monk subclass. So whether that's storm or some other, deviation into lightning or thunder, we talked a little bit about like the 4 elements having like some crossover with the ideas, but something that's more explicitly, clearly, and coherently lightning and thunder.
And well written.
Yeah, ideally a little more well written. Yeah, I think the thing about monk subclasses, I've made, I think, 1 or 2 before, or I've worked with one of my current players to adapt an existing subclass using some suggested changes that we found together online for the Way of the Long Death. We're working with an amended version of that, which is pretty fun. But the whole cloth thing, going through my process of reading through a bunch of the existing subclasses to kind of see what the progression feels like, what are the major touchstones that we hit on. And monks don't have super clear guidelines in terms of like, here's what level 6 should do, here's what level 11 should do. Whereas like, there are some subclasses that have pretty clear defined boundaries of like, okay, at whatever the second level marker your subclass features come at, that should be a defensive boost, or that should be a damage boost. Like,
right.
Monks don't have quite so cut and dry things like that.
It's all pretty murky, yeah.
The thing I did notice, though, is that like the 17th level features almost across the board are a whole like new thing, and usually it's like borrowing from an existing other class. Like it's doing something that another either core class does a little bit, or like adapts another subclass ability or a spell that like monks don't have access to, but like fits thematically with the thing.
Yeah.
So I actually ended up like taking that as inspiration for my capstone and just being like, let me just basically steal something else, reword it, make it feel more like it's core to this monk's identity, and then go from there. So
it was a very interesting week. I did what I normally try not to do, just because I assumed there would be a lot of adaptations for Lightning and Thunder monks out there already. I went to Reddit, I went to Pinterest, I went to Instagram, and I just searched Lightning and Thunder monk subclasses, and there are a ton in almost every iteration.
One of my first sort of ideas was just to go very like Storm Sorcerer kind of route, just to go either Storm Sorcerer or Tempest Cleric or Storm Herald Barbarian, sort of just like keep it very like, you are about storms and tempests and it's got a natural feel to it, but specifically nature of roiling seas and torrential thunderstorms, which is cool. But you're right, there is no shortage of that in the online D&D homebrew space, D&D wiki and all that. Like, you can absolutely find a storm monk, no problem. So I decided to pivot away from like explicitly storm and focus on just a single aspect and ride that line as much as I could.
Also, while we are on the topic of what inspired us this week, we do have to shout out a listener of the podcast. His name is Zach. He emailed us quite a while ago and gave us one of his suggestions, one of his write-ups for a storm monk that was very cool. We talked to him about either coming on and looking at his subclass that he made, or kind of Dan and I breaking it down in some bonus content on the Patreon. So thank you to Zach for this prompt and for giving us your own creation. That doesn't happen very often. So thank you very much.
Yeah, we'd love to hear if we've got a creation that we went through here on the podcast that you sparked your own creativity, made you feel like you wanted to make something in the same line. Send it to us. Absolutely. I'd love to read through it. I'm sure Michael would too.
Yes, absolutely.
And if it's a thing you want us to give you notes on, sure. But if it's a thing that's just like, I just wanted to share this, please do. We would love to see that. You can email us your homebrew prompts to add to our list, or those wonderful creations that you make over at collegeofcreationpod@gmail.com.
We would love to hear from you.
Yeah, definitely. We've said it over and over. This show is not just about like listening to us make cool things that we like, but it's about hopefully inspiring the community that listens to also feel like it's not that hard to make things, and it's very fun, and it's fulfilling, and can be collaborative, and can be just a really fun way to add your own flair and your own style to your games.
In that vein, it's high time we just get into the creations.
Yeah, Michael, show me what you got.
All right, if you would please open your document, Dan,
Okay.
As I said a little bit before, I did look into what was kind of going on in the community as far as lightning or thunder based monks that have been made in the past. I didn't want to tread over kind of familiar ground here, so I went in a totally different direction. And I call this the monastic tradition, the way of the nervous spark.
This is great. I'm already excited about the nervous part of this and what that has to portend. I will tell you, we have named our things almost the same thing. Mine is called the way of the spark. So proceed.
So this is the way of the nervous spark. Monks that follow the way of the nervous spark use their ki to manipulate the firings and misfirings of the nervous system. To them, external light and sound are innate and concurrent additions to their arsenal, eventually becoming very intimate and internal occurrences. Rolling thunder can manifest as a pounding headache, and an arc of lightning a bout of confusion. In bolstering their own mental constitution, nervous spark monks develop the ability to reach into the minds of others. This can aid them in both the procuring of information and the attacking with significant amount of strategy. We kick this off right here at 3rd level with the covert impulses feature. Your body naturally produces static and can transfer it to other creatures subliminally. If you hit another creature with an unarmed strike or a monk weapon, you can choose to deal lightning or thunder damage instead of the damage that would typically be dealt. Whenever you deal lightning or thunder damage in this way, your attacks make no light and no sound, only striking within the mind of the creature receiving the damage. So it is undetectable from anyone else other than the creature that you are striking. It is all mental damage, but it still counts as lightning or thunder. You also have a bit of spell casting that starts at 3rd level. I call this spark casting. As a Neural Spark monk, you gain a limited spellcasting ability. At the following levels, you can choose one of the spell options presented in the Neural Spark spells table. You can cast each spell once by spending a number of key points equal to the spell's level. At 3rd level, you can choose between Dissonant Whispers and Thunderwave. At 5th level, Mind Spike or Shatter. At 9th level, Antagonize or Call Lightning. At 13th level, Elemental Bane with only Lightning or Thunder as options there, or Rolithim's Psychic Lance, and at 17th level, you can choose between Dream or Synaptic Static. Any lightning or thunder damage dealt by these spells can impact your target's mind in the same manner as your Covert Impulses feature. Once each spell has been cast, it can't be cast again until you complete a long rest. So at 3rd level, we have a little bit of spellcasting versatility and some subliminal attacking ability.
I really like just from the get-go, just these first, the base features and the description. I love the framing of like the spark being like this, it's about neurological sparks, neurons and the functioning of the brain in a really interesting way that I think feels really neat and totally right in line with like certain monk things, right? Like pressure points, or like knowing the body well enough to be able to arrest not just like physical processes and movements and things like that, but also to like hit something that like triggers a neurological response. Feels like a thing that a monk would be able to do for sure.
Yeah. I'm going to shock you, but it's going to be like hitting your funny bone. Shocking.
Right. It's that kind of thing.
It's going to be all bodily, an internal like synapse type of thing.
Yeah, it's those weird things like where the like the nerve map and how that works, and so like you're hitting all of these things that are like, it's not just triggering the like piece of the body that you're hitting, but rather it's creating a chain reaction of sensation elsewhere as well. It feels really good for monks, and even I think even could deviate away from the like strict quote unquote lightning and thunder focused part of this, and really just let it be inspired by it, but not necessarily falling in line with all of those things. I think psychic damage even feels fine for parts of it,
which actually is a good segue into level 6.
Yeah.
This is the Neural Bypass feature. Whenever you deal lightning or thunder damage to another creature, you can choose any amount of that damage to count as psychic damage instead. In addition, if another creature is resistant to lightning, thunder, or psychic damage, but not all three, those resistances do not apply to you. So there's the correlation. It comes online a little bit after your first features there.
Yeah. I do like that as sort of like an upper level, like psychic is pretty strong to give at third level, so balancing that is pretty decent. I like that.
Yeah. Originally I had that at third level. It moved around a lot, actually. It jumped all the way up to 11th at one point. This was a very fluid set of features. They all kind of have been everywhere at one point. So it's interesting that they fell the way they did.
Sure.
Moving on to 11th level, we have the Synaptic Fortitude feature. Your mind can consciously shake off more severe mental blemishes. You are resistant to psychic damage, and the paralyzed and stunned conditions are added to your Stillness of Mind feature, allowing you to use an action to end one effect on yourself that is causing either of those conditions.
I love that.
A bolster of your monk ability. Actually, I should say, as I'm going through these, because these are a lot of passive things, right? It's not a lot of active things that you can choose to do. Spellcasting is a little bit, but that's just once per long rest. I wrote this with your monastic techniques in mind, assuming that is in play.
Interesting.
That is an option that you can get at 9th and 13th level as well.
Sure.
So these are kind of in augmentation of that idea.
Yeah, sure. I do like, though, with regard to this one, the tying it to a core monk feature. I did that actually a fair bit with mine as well, of like tying to add elements of usefulness to those core abilities as well, like adding those additional conditions to the Stillness of Mind. For me, is a really cool way to still make it feel really in line with the monk, but also let it feel stronger or different than the existing monk in a specific direction that really, weighs down the identity of the subclass, for sure. That's great.
Thank you. And the capstone. I call this grounding. I don't know if I'm in love with the name. I think it makes sense, but again, this is kind of the one where it may or may not be here when I update this later. This is called grounding. You can absorb external energy in order to increase the effectiveness of your mental abilities. You are now immune to lightning and thunder damage. When another creature within 30 feet of you uses a feature or casts a spell that deals either lightning or thunder damage to a single target, you can use your reaction to spend 6 key points and force that creature to target you instead. The creature then takes psychic damage equal to the spell's original damage output. So it is a reaction reversal.
That is cool. Immunity is heavy. Is this were you planning on limiting the reaction in any way? Well, I guess it's limited by key points. Yeah, that's
it's
fine.
Limited by key points. At first, I had it twice per long rest, but then I was like, for 6 key points, is anyone going to use it more than twice anyway? It's also a reaction too, so the amount of times you're going to run into lightning or thunder based creatures is whatever percentage that's going to be based on your campaign setting. So that's a limiting factor too.
Well, and especially when you look at the other restriction on it, which is that it's got to be a spell that only targets a single creature. There's not a lot of thunder damage spells that do that, and the lightning ones that do are generally lower level. If you think of ones that target multiple creatures, those are the high level ones. You're thinking of lightning bolts, chain lightning, but this could grab a call lightning very easily, which is very fun, right? Yeah. And it feels right for the thing, but also is like, do you want to spend 6 key points to nullify a single call lightning if the concentration on the spell is still up? It's the kind of thing that can really save the party's butts in a bad situation, but isn't going to be like, you use this every single fight you're in, and it's always going to be like a thorn in the DM side. But when it comes up, it's going to be really cool to use.
I had reservations about making a capstone a reaction That felt weird to me.
I like it. I think mine
liked
is
the
too.
flavor of it. So,
or one of my features is a reaction for sure. But it feels fine to me. If you look at like monk capstones, for the most part, they are like single actions or reactions or bonus actions that apply like a pretty like instantaneous effect, rather than anything long term like paladins, like clerics, or anything like that. Except for there's one that does do more of a paladin-y thing. But I think that's partially because it comes at 17 and not 19 or 20. So your real capstone for the class is the core features rather than the subclass features.
I thought about adding a spell here too, but you also get astral projection at 18th level as a core feature. And that felt weird to have like almost identical verbiage. Like you can use this for key points, and then the core class is like you can also use this for key points. That felt a little bit too repetitive. So this, it kind of floated in the middle as far as things that exist.
Yeah.
But as a whole, I'm happy with this.
I think that's okay. I think it's very fair to say that like in certain cases, it's pretty clear that the design of a certain class or subclass is primarily with a focus on the core play levels, which are going to be lower to mid levels. And so those higher level features sometimes do feel like they're kind of tossed in, but it's because the subclass is sort of designed to be played at the middling levels. And, if you get to those higher levels, great, you get this little thing, but like really where the meat and potatoes of it is where most people are going to be playing, which makes sense.
Yeah, I'm happy with it. I like a lot of the things within this subclass. I think there are clear places that can do with some testing or some augmentation, but I think the tweaks would be pretty minor here. So I'm happy about it.
Yeah, I think I really like, again, the framing around this sort of like neurological focus, this playing with pressure points or playing with those things that like Stunning Strike sort of addresses the idea of like, yes, you can, manipulate the ki flowing through somebody else's body in a way that feels very monastic. You're messing with pressure points or with energy flow. And this feels like it's like moving in that same direction. And I feel like anything to augment this thing would just be more of that. That's all I would really want to see more of. I like the spell list too. And I like the choose one or the other sort of situation. Not very many things so have like
all psychic, right? Or you can go all storm. Or a combination of the two.
There's also notably not a provision in there to change your decision.
I had that in there at one point, and I thought it fit the subclass a little bit better to just have concrete selections. Like, this is the path that you're choosing.
Yeah.
I'm fine with locking people in, giving monks a little taste of the sorcerer energy.
Again, it feels very monastic too, right? Like, now you have come to an important point where you need to choose a path, and that path is going to have drawbacks and benefits, but like part of it is living with the choices that you make, and part of it is like deciding this is the direction I'm going, and you can pick a different spell later and it might not be in line with that first one, but that's fine. It doesn't have to be. You may have changed, but I'm into it.
Thanks, man. Let's see what you brought to the table today.
All right. Yes, indeed. You can open up your document and find, like I said, it's called The Way of the Spark. And I went I narrowed it down quite a bit, from lightning and thunder to just lightning, and then from just lightning to specifically electricity, and not necessarily storm-related electricity, but just like electricity as the concept of, electrically charged particles doing the things that they do, and like infusing whatever they infuse with power or spark or something. So,
nice.
Electricity, a volatile and powerful force, difficult to harness and even more difficult to channel. The power of the roiling thunderstorm begins with little more than a single solitary spark. tiny charged particles interacting and setting off a grand display exponentially more powerful than its genesis. This is the driving ethos of monks who dedicate themselves to the way of the spark. A single life is so small on the grand scale, but the interactions of one individual can create changes and spur events beyond one's comprehension. By communing with storms, infusing oneself with raw power, and learning to control the chaos into something useful, these monks seek a new self and a new future. Somewhat similar to yours, we start with 2 level 3 features. So at 3rd level, you gain the static charge feature. So the electrical energy coursing through you empowers your strikes. When you hit a target with an unarmed strike, you can charge the target with static electricity. A statically charged creature must subtract 1d4 from all attack rolls and saving throws until the beginning of your next turn.
Ooh, I like that.
Additionally, you get the Potent Conductor feature. At 3rd level, when you take lightning damage, you can use your reaction to gain resistance to the triggering damage and regain 1 spent ki point instead. Just a little passive way to regain a little bit of ki in very specific scenarios. So you can give yourself sort of temporary resistance to lightning damage. You don't ever get full lightning resistance or immunity in this subclass. But I like having the option to use your reaction to give yourself resistance in sort of an absorb elements way, but instead of empowering your next strike, you are filling yourself back up with the energy you use to fuel everything.
That's cool.
And this static charge feature will sort of come back in a couple of the other features in this subclass. So that statically charged thing is just, you're not doing a crazy penalty to anybody, and you're also not doing any additional damage. That was one of the things that I really wanted to avoid making a core part of the subclass, but I wanted to have it be something where it's like you are affecting conditions, you're affecting other people's ability to function because you are just charging them with electricity, you're shocking them into less effective existence. So at 6th level, you gain the Lightning Jump feature. You can move like a bolt of lightning. When you use your Step of the Wind feature, you can teleport up to your movement speed rather than moving normally, and all creatures within 5 feet of your original space become statically charged until the beginning of your next turn.
Okay.
They'll take that 1d4. So basically, when you use your Step of the Wind to dash or to disengage, you just pop away instead. You sort of emit like a little pulse when you leave. Similar to Thunderstep in that way, but again, limited by your ki points, and also doesn't do any damage, but just affects all of the creatures around you with a little bit of paralyzing force.
Sweet.
At 11th level, you gain the Discharge feature. So your body crackles with potential energy and unstable forces. When a creature hits you with a melee weapon attack, you can spend 2 ki points as a reaction to gain resistance to the triggering damage. Additionally, the attacker must make a Constitution saving throw against your ki save DC or become paralyzed until the end of your next turn as it is shocked by an electric jolt. So this is just, somebody touching a doorknob, and you happen to be the doorknob. And then finally, at 17th level, we get High Voltage Strikes. So your electrically empowered attacks can barely be contained to a single target. When a creature fails its saving throw against your Stunning Strike feature, you can immediately spend ki points to cause a bolt of lightning to strike an additional target within 30 feet of the original target. You can spend up to 3 ki points in this way, choosing a separate target for each bolt. Each additional target must make a Constitution saving throw against your ki save DC, or take 4d10 lightning damage and become statically charged until the beginning of your next turn. On a successful save, the target takes half damage and is not statically charged. And that's it. So you just get it's a slightly weaker version of Chain Lightning, but it also applies that static charge as well to the additional targets, and is triggered by your Stunning Strike. Which I suppose if you used the optional, monastic techniques, this wouldn't have to be tied to necessarily Stunning Strike, or you could tie this to a Flurry of Blows instead, just to keep that additional ki point expenditure and something like that.
Yeah, this is really great. I like this a lot. This is a great option for somebody who wants to play something like a Tempest Cleric or a Storm Sorcerer, but with more of a physical manifestation on it.
Yeah.
You are always present in this lightning riddled body, and that is what determines your strategy in any situation.
Yeah.
Especially with the discharge feature, I love things like that, where just physical touch can invoke some reaction, and that is very cool. That will always have narrative use because it doesn't deal any damage.
Right.
How many times in games has combat not ensued, but your player character takes damage from somebody, you have a little scuffle in the street or whatever, you get into an altercation in a shop or whatever the case may be. Absolutely, you could put this into play if you want to spend the 2 key points.
Yeah.
Just de-escalate the situation immediately by paralyzing whoever is trying to cause a disturbance.
Right.
There are a lot of different uses for these 5 features, and I love that.
I was very inspired by the old Static Shock cartoon. I was always a big fan of that one. I wanted to have like a little bit of a superhero sort of feel, a little bit of like, you're bopping around with the lightning jump. You're also like hitting maybe 3 different people on your turn and trying to statically charge all of them, right? And it's just like sending energy kind of all around. To me, that was sort of like the intention going in. And then I also thought about how cool it would be to have a Warforged as this subclass and just like be like, I'm like a little bit of an overcharged robot. And so, people be trying to hit me with their attacks, just jolting them a little bit here and there, sucking in lightning, electricity, whatever it is, and just using that to power yourself up. I think it would be super fun to play a Warforged monk, and like you don't usually find a Warforged monk, but this is like, for me, the perfect subclass to go along with it, potentially.
I agree. There are several subclasses that both of us have made that I'm like, that's very cool in concept. I would love for somebody to try this. Even at my table, I'd love to run a game for somebody to try this.
Yeah.
This is one that I would want to play, personally.
It'd be very fun. Good stuff. I'm glad that, like, even with very similar names, we came up with very different ideas.
Almost identical names.
Maybe I should change my name a little bit. Did you have any like runner-up ideas for this one? Because I sure did.
Like name-wise or concept-wise?
Concept-wise, because like one of the ones that I was thinking about before I decided to go lightning, I started thinking about thunder, and that made me just think about like sound and thunder. So I was like, what if I could do something that like feels almost bardic in the monk space, but like specifically around like drumming and just like noise. I think that could be pretty interesting.
One of my very first ideas, can't remember if it was my initial thought right out of the gate or not, but I thought it'd be very cool to also go the superhero route, but along the lines of the Flash.
Oh,
monks are always the go-to class if you want to make a speedster in D&D, but there's not anything like in the mechanic that kind of groups all of those things together. You kind of have to make a concept character to get to the level that you'd want to get to. This would be the prompt, I think, that would allow for a mechanical reason to make a Flash type monk. And I just thought that there was just too much overlap with other things that already existed. So maybe the Flash just has to remain one of those conceptual idea characters that you throw into a one shot here and there. But I like this a lot more. I like what I came up a lot more than that.
Yeah, I think it's a really cool way to address that idea of lightning or electricity as mental, those mental synapse firing. It's great concept. Way to pivot into that space. I would never have thought of that particular angle, but that's really cool.
Thank you, man.
Very, very neat.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun this time. I think both of our subclasses are very cool and very playable. Like, they're very applicable to the game.
Well, Michael, next week, we actually are going to pivot away and not be making anything new next week.
Correct. Yeah. Instead of making something new next week, Dan and I thought that it is high time to look back at some of our creations from the past, and we're going to be updating episodes 1 through 5. So we're going to look back at our energy sorcerers, our HP siphoning barbarians, our feats for monks, our picks for our fighter blocks, and the items that we made that scale with character level. We're going to be updating those, talking about the differences between our initial creations and our updates, and kind of paving the way forward to actually creating a compendium of sorts that we have been slightly joking about for 5 months.
It's not a joke anymore, Michael.
100% real.
Get ready for the first Volume 1 College of Creation compendium that will be made available to all of our Patreon subscribers before anybody else. And then to everyone else, I'm sure, at some point, somewhere, you will be able to find it. But if you want to be on the ground floor of that, if you want to get the compendium of all the good stuff first, get in on that Patreon. It's patreon.com/College of Creation Pod. Now, of course, while we're taking this time to update our creations, obviously, still want prompts. So feel free to keep sending those in. We'll keep adding them to the list, and we'll get back to rolling for prompts very soon. But yeah, I'm excited to get into a few episodes of us going over some of the old creations, retouching on some of the ideas that we had. I want to go back and listen to a bunch of the episodes again so that I can remember, all the helpful, good stuff that you said about some of the things that I made and try and take those things into account. My creation style has changed so much, even in these few short months. So I'm really excited to get back into exploring some of those older ideas again. It's a hard process often to do the editing and to do the proofreading and to do the updating. But I think if we make it an event, if we make it something for all of our listeners to also engage with, I think it will make it so much more engaging and enjoyable for me as the creator as well.
Well, truly, that's been the spark of this whole project, right? Is taking ideas from each other, but also taking ideas that neither of us would ever have thought up on our own, and just putting that type of lens on old things that kind of have been considered done for the past couple months, and reopening that door, walking through it with fresh eyes and new perspectives, and a lot of tools that we have gained from each other. I think those old creations can only get stronger from this new perspective that both of us have.
I couldn't agree more. And beyond the sort of retrospective episodes, we're also thinking about some other ideas to bring in to sort of fill the gap a little bit, still give you something to chew on, but maybe something a little bit different. Maybe some live creations where Michael and I actually work not separately on a prompt, but work instead together to try and come up with something that fits a certain prompt. Maybe fixing some of the things that we have been particularly vocal about disliking that exist within the game space already.
Yeah, there are definitely plenty of things within the framework of Dungeons & Dragons that both of us have expressed could be better. Not necessarily in need of a full patch, because we've also said that holes in the game invite creativity, but there are some things that might be a bit past patching and just need a total save. I'm very much looking forward to a live rework of the Battle Rager Barbarian.
Get ready for it, folks. We're going to fix our least favorite things at some point here. We are excited for what the future holds for the next handful of episodes, the next month or so of the College of Creation. We hope you're excited for it too. And don't you worry, we'll be back to creating brand new stuff for you every single week before too long. Michael, you have anything to say to the people before we say goodbye?
Dan, I always have something to say to the people before we go. Today's concerns theater. Now, before I was a D&D guy, I was a theater guy. It was one of the first lifelong passions that I discovered within myself, moving from adolescence into adulthood. And since then, I have been in a whole bunch of stage shows. I've directed a whole bunch of stage shows. And one of the things I like most about it, and what I've come to like a lot about Dungeons & Dragons is that they are very similar. I think that directing a show and running a D&D table takes very similar levels of patience and compassion and collaboration and creativity. And one of the things that I always tell my casts when I direct shows is that you always have to remember to make yourself heard, make yourself understood, and make yourself believed. The audience has to hear you, they have to understand you, and they have to believe you. I try and hold myself to those same standards as a dungeon master. I think that your players really have to hear your voice, not just verbally, but they have to hear what you're saying as far as what you are putting into your games. They have to hear your voice in your writing, in your NPCs, in your environmental elements in your games. They have to understand what you're saying. You have to have clarity of thought and clarity of purpose, and they have to believe what you're saying. You have to be invested. You have to lean into your passions. You have to lean into the things that make the game special for you. Because if you don't do that, they may hear you and they may understand what you're trying to say, but they may not believe it. So if you can tackle all three of those levels of performance as a dungeon master, I think that will make a much more immersive and enjoyable and collaborative and creative environment for everyone involved.
1,000% agree, Michael. It's a tough skill set. It is a skill set. Performance things have so much applicability for D&D as well. Well, until next time, Michael, we get the week off. We don't have to work on anything. Well, nothing new. We do still have to work on the old things that we already made.
Plenty of work to be done. Plenty of work to be done. Just no new roles this week.
We will still be busy bees over here at the College of Creation, and we hope you will join us to talk about some of our old and classic creations next time. We'll talk to you then.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Hey everyone, it's Michael. Thanks for listening to this episode of the College of Creation. If you want to see our creations from this episode and our past episodes, you can find those for free on our Patreon page. That's patreon.com/College of Creation Pod. And if you decide to become a patron, you'll also automatically get access to any revised versions of the things we've created, plus our patron Discord, and bonus chats with Dan and myself. You can send any of your own homebrew prompts or questions to collegeofcreationpod@gmail.com, and our music is by Fuserwolf. You can check out his tunes on Bandcamp and Spotify. As always, thank you so much for listening.